Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Yeah, I'm only smiling because this is a hell of a week for a test drive. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge there. Personally, I hope we don't have 60 pass attempts this week because if we do, I know what the outcome's going to be.
Big trouble if we're attempting 60 passes for the Hawkeyes. Welcome to the Eye on the Hawks podcast. We're man down this week. It's Mitch Fick is on vacation. He's going to the Big Island out in Hawaii, so it's just Owen Sebring and Mike Howell holding the fort down here at Eye on the Hawks HQ. No matter who's the personnel on a week-by-week basis, you can follow us across all of the imaginable social media platforms that you could possibly find: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Wait, do we have a Facebook page?
We do not.
Iowa's News Now.
Iowa's News Now does, but we do not.
But what are the ones we have? We have X, we have YouTube, we have Instagram. Follow us. You can follow Mike Howell. He's posting Hawkeye content on X. Owen Sebring. You can follow me. I'm posting all sorts of stuff. Had some throwback video to the last time Iowa won a game in Columbus. Something they're going to be attempting to do this Saturday for the first time since 1991.
Can I give you a little bit of Iowa Ohio State trivia real quick?
Let's hear it.
Okay, well, it's less a trivia and more of like kind of a startling fact that I was looking through all the annals of Iowa and Ohio State, two of the members of the Big Ten going back a long time. Iowa has won 15 games against Ohio State. I think Ohio State has like 45 or 50 or something like that.
Yeah.
Out of those games, how many have they won at home and how many have they won away?
I know I looked into this a little bit. Since 1960, Iowa's only won 3 games in Columbus. But all time, out of those 15 wins, like 6 or 7, maybe?
So they've actually won 8 in Columbus and 7 in Iowa City. So they've actually won more games in Columbus than in Iowa City over Ohio State. Ohio State has 47 wins. There were 3 ties back in the days when, ties happened.
Yeah. You're a soccer fan. You probably love those days of football.
As much crap as soccer gets for draws is what we call them, not ties. It is a bummer sometimes. Well, actually, it depends. If you're losing and you come back and draw, that's like some fans treat it as a win. If you're in this case, if you could draw and Ohio State's number 3 in the country, you could look at draws like, hey, we're right there, as a positive. But, that's not the case in college football.
That's true, yeah. I just noticed that last time. I mean, it's weird how recent that would happen. Like, when in 91, when they beat Ohio State in Columbus, they went to the Holiday Bowl, played BYU, and tied. Like, what do you even take out of that if you end your season in a bowl game in a tie? I mean, I feel like even postseason games should have had a exclusion rule for being ties back then. But
was Steve Young the quarterback on that ball?
Ooh, no, that had been post-Young. Steve Young would have finished at BYU in like 84, 83 or something. He was drafted by the Buccaneers in like 84, 85, something like that.
Oh, okay. I thought, since he won that Super Bowl in 84 or 94, I thought it was a little later.
Actually, who was probably the quarterback of that team was Ty Detmer.
Yep, you're right. I just looked it up. Ty Detmer.
Did he win the Heisman that year?
Ty
Detmer was a Heisman winner.
I didn't know this is where we're going to start. 1990, yes. So.
Oh, so the year before.
The year before, yep.
Okay. There's a funny story that Kurt Warner told once about when he came out of college at UNI, he went to the Packers minicamp, and the QBs he had to go up against were like Brett Favre, Mark Brunell, and Ty Detmer, who just won the Heisman Trophy. He had a little battle there in Green Bay. But we're getting off the rails pretty early here, Mike and I are, so we're going to be talking about Ohio State this week. Number 3 team in the nation. We know it's going to be an uphill battle. Iowa not traditionally even, but over the last few years has not performed the best against ranked teams or some of those top caliber teams in the Big Ten. Our colleague over at the Des Moines Register, Tyler Tashman, asked Kirk Ferentz about how Iowa's faced those teams in the last few seasons.
You guys beat Penn State in 2021 at Kinnick, but since then haven't beaten Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. From your perspective, where do you feel like that gap is maybe between where you're and they're at and what needs to be done to kind of close that?
Yeah, again, I'm not really looking at it that way. We just take each week individually. But, it kind of goes back. We've been playing pretty good defense. It's an old narrative. I mean, we've played pretty well defensively. We've had issues with the offensive line. And then last year we obviously had some challenges at the quarterback spot. So it's yesterday's news. And if you're going to play a team that is nationally ranked, top 10 team, and those teams you mentioned typically are in that neighborhood, I'm not saying you got to be firing on all three cylinders, but it sure helps. It gives you a chance. And, I guess I look at it the other way. I look at last year. I'll go back to that, because I know a lot's been written about how many points we scored against whoever it was a year ago. And, I think maybe you look at it the other way. Maybe we did a hell of a job winning 10 games. So there's two ways to look at every coin. And talent, there's ebb and flow of talent. I've been here 25 years, going on 26 now, and it's true each and every year. Every year's got its own challenges. You deal with the challenges that are in front of you. Try to play to your strengths and do the best you can on an annual basis. And, over the long haul, we're proud of our record. So, how it all pans out, it's a year-to-year basis kind of thing.
It's somewhat of a startling statistic, but also at the same time, it's a little bit of a small sample size. I mean, they beat Penn State in 21. That's only, 2 seasons since that point, and they don't even it's not like they even play all of those teams each year. Last year they played Penn State and Michigan in the Big Ten Championship. The year before that they played
Ohio State.
Was it just Ohio State?
I believe so.
Yeah. And so
2020.
It's not like there's a huge sample size to look at between them, but it's at least something interesting that those are the teams you want to beat if you're going to be a contender in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and that same year in 2021 when they beat Penn State, who ended up 7-5 afterwards, they lost to Michigan in the Big Ten title game that year. I think it's less of the record, 0-5, that was the record in the last 5 meetings. It's more of how you did it. I don't think they've scored a point. Actually, they did. At Ohio State last time, it was a pick. Was it a fumble or pick six?
Scoop and scored.
Joe Evans scored, and they actually took the lead 7-3, and then they didn't score again, or they might have kicked a field goal, but yeah. So I think it's more of the way that it's happened. If you lost close games and you were competitive, I think the narrative is different. And I disagree slightly. Obviously, when you're in the program, you're going to think a little different than Kirk. That is the narrative. Iowa's been able to beat the Big Ten West in the bottom half of the conference, but they haven't been able to play with the top dogs, and that's why nationally they're not looked at as a CFP threat or like a national power.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the weird thing about it is that outside of those 3 teams, it's there's not even a lot of ranked teams on their schedule the last couple of years. I mean, there haven't been a lot of opportunities to beat a ranked team because they're not playing them. Not even to Iowa's fault. It's just that they've played Big Ten West schedules against a lot of teams that are not serious national contenders. Same goes this year, that they've got a schedule that puts them against Ohio State, but outside of that, their schedule, Iowa State in the rearview mirror looks like a pretty impressive team, but outside of that, it's not like we have a lot of teams coming up that are going to be serious national contenders.
And that's less on Iowa. You play who you play, right?
Exactly.
You win, and especially last year. It's more of an indictment on the Big Ten West. When you're looking at it, you expect last year and the years prior, like Nebraska and Wisconsin, as teams that traditionally have been good Big Ten teams. So you expect them to get up and be ranked. I mean, Nebraska, if they didn't lose to Illinois, would be a ranked team on your schedule right now. But right now, like you said, Wisconsin's not going to be there. Michigan State's not going to be there. Washington's not going to be there unless they pull off this upset. I guess it's not an upset. They're actually favored against Michigan this week. But there's probably not a lot of chances for a ranked win outside of this one right now, outside of Nebraska, who possibly could get there later in the year.
That's true. Nebraska could work their way up. I guess I don't know a lot about Wisconsin. They're 2-2 right now. That's usually an elite-ish opponent, like a ranked team, but they won't be ranked by the time.
Tyler Van Dyke's out for the season, so Braden Locke is it Braden or Brandon Locke is in there. So they were up early last week against USC. It was 21-10. USC came back in the second half and won. I think it was more on USC, kind of starting slow, than it was really Wisconsin. But yeah, we'll have to see with them.
Yeah, I know you built a full screen here. Let's bring this up just to show off your work a little bit here. The number 3 Buckeyes score. I mean, just so impressive, especially for the team numbers is what really does it for Ohio State. Scoring offense, they're 4th at 48 points a game. I'm surprised that's even 4th. That's a big number. Total offense, over 530 yards a game. Scoring defense, only 6 points per game. What's especially impressive about that nationally is that, that's not just among Big Ten teams. That's not among Power 4 teams. That's among every team in FBS football. Group of 5, Power 4, independent, whatever. 6.7 points per game. Total defense, less than 200 yards a game. The one thing I will say about Ohio State is that they have had, as much as Iowa has not played a real daunting first 4 games, Ohio State's played even less of a schedule the first 4 games. Michigan State is going to be one of the bottom probably 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten this year. Their other 3 wins are against Marshall, Western Michigan, and Akron. 2 MAC teams, and I don't know much about Marshall, I guess, this year, if they'll be a contender or not in a group of 5 since. But, they are putting up these impressive numbers against opponents that don't bring a lot to the table. So it's much like Iowa and every other team, these next few weeks are what's going to dictate what this team is going to look like going forward. But the biggest question is going to be the rushing attack, because Caleb Johnson has established his place as one of the best running backs in the country. Ohio State, they've established their place as one of the best running defenses in the country. In terms of total rushing defense across the nation, Ohio State is 3rd. They average giving up 61 yards a game on the ground, best in the Big Ten. So the question is, what can Caleb Johnson do against them?
That's a great question, too. I mean, and to your point, like the strength of schedule for Ohio State is ranked 123rd right now.
Wow, really?
Now, it does get impressive. It gets more difficult. They play Iowa this week, Oregon next week. And I believe, let me double check that, that's on the road. It is. And then Nebraska, then Penn State. So
Really?
That's a 4-game stretch. And obviously they have Indiana and then Michigan to end the year. Indiana, who knew that was going to be a tough game before the season? But it looks like it now. And then Michigan's their arch rivals, so obviously, and they're currently ranked 10th, which I don't think they're the 10th best team in the country, Michigan, but they've won the games they needed to get that ranking. But yeah, I'm not really sure, even watching last week's game against Michigan State, who I think might contend for a bowl game. So I think they might be kind of in the middle. I like their coach and I like Aiden Childs. They could move the ball against Ohio State.
Sure.
I know we'll talk about we're talking about the Ohio State defense. And they just had so many turnovers. They had like the first 3 drives.
Ohio State does?
Michigan State, they committed turnovers.
Sure.
So Michigan State, their first drive, they got down to near the red zone and coughed it up on a fumble. They scored their second drive, and their third drive, I think they threw a pick, or they had another fumble after driving into territory. So is this Ohio State? They have a ton of great athletes. Can Iowa run against this? I'm not so sure. I think they're going to stack the box and say, Cade, beat you over the top.
Yeah, something that is at least worth keeping an eye on is that Iowa, of course, is unranked going into this game. Ohio State's got a lot of ranked teams coming up, but in Ryan Day's tenure with the Buckeyes, he's, I believe, 46-0 against unranked teams. So, the guys know how to come out and play. But, boy, that's an interesting schedule they've got coming up between Oregon. Man, that's going to be a good game. Penn State.
You want the teams that Ryan Days has lost to?
Okay.
Oh, they lost to Missouri, and I think they had a lot of opt-outs last year in whatever bowl game it was, which a top 10 team. Michigan, and won the national title. The year before, they lost to UGA in the semifinal. Georgia. They lost to Michigan again. They lost to Michigan the year before, and that was and then Oregon, who was ranked highly that year. In 20, they lost to Bama in, I believe, the national title game. And then the year before, they lost to Clemson in the semifinal game. The last unranked team they played was Urban Meyer's last year was Purdue.
Yeah.
Beat them by a couple scores.
Okay, man. Imagine being that team and having that fan base that still says, Ryan Day's on the hot seat because he can't beat Michigan. Imagine having that be your team. Those are the only games you lose.
I know, right?
You can't beat Michigan, so Ryan Day.
Embarrassment of riches.
Better figure it out, man. Dude sucks.
If they lost to Michigan this year, though, I think it's true. They should handle Michigan, right?
Well, that is true, but still just incredible, what some teams' expectations are. Boy, can you imagine a Hawkeye fan having that, where it's you've lost, 5 games over the last 5 years. That's impressive. But going back to the rushing attack, that's going to be, I feel where this game is decided is the rushing game. Caleb has looked great over the first 4 games. Have the defenses he's gone against been good? They've been pretty, between Iowa State and Minnesota, I think you've got a couple of pretty good rushing defenses. And so it's going to be the unstoppable force, immovable object scenario between Caleb. Can he move the ball against what is maybe the best rushing defense in the country?
Let me ask you a question before we get to our next soundbite with Cade and KJ.
Okay.
If, say, we fast forward to what game, 2:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, Saturday, and Iowa wins, what does that look like? What does Iowa have to do to take a win in Columbus this week?
Well, first off, it cannot look anything like their first 4 games. Because they just have to string a good 4 quarters together. They can't come out slow for the first half, and a slow first half could have put them behind 21-0, 28-0, 35-0. So you can't come back from a slow first half if it's Ohio State that you're going up against. So a win would have to look like 4 great, almost perfect 4 quarters for the Hawkeyes. Caleb Johnson would have to probably put up 100 60 or so yards on the ground, I think. Cade McNamara would have to, I mean, he's had some games where he's at least been accurate. I think that would have to continue. He'd have to be like 70% accurate through the air, no interceptions, maybe throw a couple touchdowns. Maybe people are saying maybe this is the breakout game for Caleb Brown back in his old stadium. Maybe Jacob Gill catches a touchdown. Maybe this is finally when Luke Lachey has his first big game, which would be a big game for him because his dad's going to be on the radio call for Ohio State. So it'd be a fun breakout game to watch for Luke Lachey. And then the defense, I think, would have to give up. I think that if Iowa's offense does well, I think that Iowa's defense could still give up 3 touchdowns and they could find a way to win, maybe kick a couple Drew Stevens field goals. But I don't. If Iowa gives up 28 points or more, I don't see that becoming a win. So as long as they could hold them to 3 touchdowns or less, I think that could be a winning formula.
I do think they're going to have to score. I know 25 is the hot number last year.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to score more than 24 or 25 points to win this game. Mm-hmm. I think, you can't just win the turnover battle. You have to have a big swing, so maybe 3+ on your edge and not turn the ball over once. Maybe once, at the end of the half when you're throwing a Hail Mary, something like that. Who knows? I do think you have to win the time of possession battle. Hopefully that rushing game gets going.
Yeah.
And I do think Cade's not going to have to, he can't just be efficient, he has to be effective, throwing the ball at least once or twice down the field to give Caleb in the rushing game a little room, So that's the blueprint. Even then, if you do that, maybe you still lose because their offense is so explosive, but I think that's what you have to try and do.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd even say that Cade has to be great. I mean, we go back to the Michigan game last week where they were able to beat USC by just being effective, not like super efficient. And that's exactly what Cade did against Minnesota. And I think that can work as long as he could provide just even 4 or 5 first downs throughout the game on a passing play. At least keep the defense a little bit honest so they can't just completely stack the box against Caleb Johnson every single play. Mm-hmm. I think that that's at least enough to help vary things up a little bit to show that he can do something against them. I mean, it's a game that means a lot for him too. Cade was part of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry for a few seasons, and so he cares about this game a whole lot too, just as much as, maybe not as much, but quite a bit, just like Luke Lachey does. But are we ready to hear from KJ and Cade?
Yeah, let's do it.
Talking about the Ohio State defense and what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, but that's why, that's why we're on the field playing. It's like we're not, sometimes it's awesome being the underdog, and I think, that's really where a lot of guys feel more comfortable, if anything. And I think, for obviously, I guarantee you we're going to be the underdog this week. That, that's just an awesome opportunity for us to, if anything, we should play, with less stress or less, we should play more free, knowing that that's fine if everyone expects us to lose. Like, what do we got to lose? You know what I mean? So I think for us, and if anything, it gives us confidence in knowing that we can go out there and we're gonna play free and we're gonna give it everything we got.
Do you feel like you're entering this game with a chip on your shoulder?
I mean, not really, because I really don't care about the offers and stuff like that. But I'm entering with a chip on my shoulder no matter what, because it's Ohio State. I want to beat them. So I feel like even if they offer me, I wouldn't have went, because I feel like I want to beat them. So it's not like a team thing that I want to do with them. I want to beat them. So that's my goal.
Caleb, the kids in Cincinnati, it's like an hour and a half from Columbus, right? Is it kind of split between kids that want to go to Ohio State and kids that want to grow up and beat Ohio State? Is it like a 50-50 split?
Yeah, and there's people that want to go to UC too, so it's separate. It's like a little separation thing. So it's like if you want to go to Ohio State, then you go to State. If you want to go to UC, you want to go to UC. But a lot of people want to play against them because they're the top dogs. So that's what I want to do. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really fun. So
even though this is not a rivalry game in terms of being a trophy game for Iowa, it is strange, as I was hearing from those guys and as we were doing interviews yesterday, how many connections there are and how many little tie-ins to the rivalry there are between Cade McNamara, who played at Michigan and so knows the rivalry. Luke Lachey, as I mentioned, his dad went to Ohio State, so he knows this team and has been around that program. Caleb Johnson, who grew up in Ohio, knows the Ohio State team and culture there. Caleb Brown was at Ohio State. Just a lot of Iowa's playmakers, the guys who are going to be the X factors on Saturday. They're the guys who have kind of a connection to this program in some way. You could even, in a little bit looser sense, say Jay Higgins, this is kind of his unofficial homecoming game. It's the closest game to Indianapolis that he's going to play this year. So he's getting a lot more ticket requests for this game than
Counting them out of the Big Ten title game already, huh? No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, there's a lot of guys on this roster. They don't have quite as many Ohio guys, but there's a lot of Michigan kids on the Iowa roster. Those guys obviously know Ohio State well from just watching or being around the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. So there's just a lot of connections there. So this game means, even though it's not a trophy game, it might even mean more than some of the trophy games. This might mean more than the Minnesota game or the Wisconsin game to a lot of these players.
Yeah, you got a point there. And, we'll hear more from Luke later. He's kind of our Hawkeye highlight this week just because his family, he his dad was an Ohio State Buckeye. He does the radio games, like you said, so we'll hear more from him. But when you look at it, yeah, like Caleb from Ohio, he's Iowa's best player, and he didn't get offered. I know he said he went on a visit with them once. But yeah, those connections are kind of unique, I think, to this game,
Yeah.
And Cade is 1-0 against Michigan against Ohio State with Michigan when he started there back in 2021, and they went to the CFP. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those storylines and how those players, because if I was going to win, Caleb Johnson, Luke Lachey, Cade McNamara, those three are going to have to put up some numbers, right? Like they're going to have to score with this explosive Ohio State offense who has Jeremiah Smith, maybe the best receiver in college football. He's just a freshman. Mike Ibuka is going to be in the NFL next year. He could have been in the NFL this year. He opted to come back. And Travion Henderson and, I'm blanking on the other, Judkins, the other running back. Yeah. Just an outstanding team right there.
Jeremiah Smith better than that Alabama 17-year-old kid?
It's close. I do have some. Let's just transition into the Ohio State offense.
Sure.
One of our stations in Columbus, ABC 6 on your side, sent us some video, and I just got it into the system. They right before we went live, they sent me an email. So, I don't know if you were able to watch any of that Michigan State game.
I was not. No, I watched a lot of games on Saturday, but I didn't watch any of this.
If you're watching on YouTube, there were a couple of one-handed snags that he had.
Really?
Yeah. This one, that was a first down, big, like 20-yard gain, and the next one, hopefully that plays just right after that. The other one, it was when Will Howard, who their quarterback that transferred from Kansas State, had to come in for an injured Will Howard. Devin Brown had to come in and throw a touchdown. Let me cue this one up real quick.
Sure.
He actually threw a touchdown on his only throw that he made of the game.
Really?
Or I shouldn't say the only throw. I think he came in the fourth quarter and played. So
sounds like Brendan Sullivan.
Yeah, I know, right? This was titled it. I didn't get to actually review it, so let's see if we actually get the.
We see an Ohio State huddle. There we go. Nice job, WSYX. 6 on your side. Sinclair Station. Shout out Kellyanne Stitz.
There we go.
I know she's somebody I've traded some highlights with in the past.
Watch this grab right here on YouTube. Once they snap the ball, this kid, he's only got I think 300 and something yards on the year, which I think there's receivers who have a lot more.
Yeah.
But you can see the talent.
Yep. So that's Jeremiah Smith, number 4?
Yep.
Okay. That is the weird thing, as I was kind of looking up stats to see, where's Ohio State among all these stat leaders? When you at least look at the ESPN website and you go to stat leaders for each conference, it kind of shows you the top 5 amongst a number of categories. Between passing, defense, rushing, receiving, the only person among the top 5 in the Big Ten for individual stat leaders is Jeremiah Smith. He's 5th in receiving yards, but they don't have a top 5 rusher, top 5 passer, top 5 tackler, sacks, interceptions, nothing. But it's when you look at the team stats that they have the number 1 total offense, number 1 defense points allowed, number 2 passing as a team, number 1 in yards allowed, number 4 in rushing yards, number 5 in sacks. It's just such a complete unit that they have on both sides of the ball.
When you look at the games, it's like the Akron 52-6, Western Michigan 56-0, Marshall 49-40. The starters aren't playing a full game, and then against Michigan State, it was. I contend that the first half was closer than the score, just how many times Michigan State turned the ball over. Mm-hmm. But the game ended 38-7, and their backups played a full quarter. So,
really?
Yeah.
That is the weird thing that stands out, because this team doesn't have the top 5 individual passer in the conference, but they somehow have the number 2 passing offense. So there must be a lot of guys. There's obviously 2 different guys who are carrying a lot of the load in terms of passing, or at least 2 guys who have gotten a lot of snaps because they've been such big blowouts.
I will say when you're breaking down like the Iowa defense versus the Ohio State offense, and as kind of wild as it sounds, as this was like a high-profile transfer from Kansas State, Will Howard, and this is just the embarrassment of riches Ohio State has, that's probably like the weakest part of their offense.
Really?
Is the quarterback. I mean, he's good and he's accurate, but there were some throws that I saw against Michigan State. If you put pressure on him, he can sail them. But at the same time, if you do blitz and you don't get there, he can run. He hasn't really had to run all year because he's saving his body just because you don't have to,
Right.
But he is a playmaker, and I mean, when I say that he's probably the weak part of the offense, we'll see come CFP time if he can take them to that level, because I think that's when it's going to matter. I don't know if it will matter anytime this season.
The amazing thing about it, again, if you're watching on the YouTube page, which we always like to plug, that if you get a chance to watch on YouTube, you can see highlights, all of Mitch and I's video that we get on Saturdays, and you can get good breakdown of some of these full screens that Mike does a good job putting together. And right now we're looking at their four main offensive playmakers in Egbuka, Judkins, Henderson, and Smith. It's amazing how many touchdowns they've scored in 4 games. Travion Henderson has 9 touchdowns already, which, I mean, is pretty good.
How much Caleb Johnson has.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But then they have 2 other guys with 5 touchdowns, and then Egbuka has another 2 touchdowns. Just so many ways that this offense can hurt you. This is the litmus test for the Hawkeyes. Like, this was the litmus test last year when they went against Penn State. It was the litmus test 2 years ago when they went at Ohio State in the Horseshoe again, what this defense was capable of, for all of the credit they get and the adulation they get for helping win a lot of games for this program. This is kind of the test to show, okay, you can do it against Minnesota. You can do it against, Michigan State or Illinois, but can you do it against a team like Ohio State that's the number 3 team in the country? From your time watching this game, I mean, is Ohio State's offensive line, like, are they just as good as their playmakers are?
I only watched that Michigan State game. They looked pretty good. I do think that, I do think the Iowa defense, hopefully they can find places to attack that offensive line. I personally think, and Iowa doesn't like to blitz a lot, that for them to be effective, maybe in the second half they're going to have to put pressure on Howard, because if he has time, to throw the ball, a lot of it, he's going to find these receivers. They're excellent, and you've seen Iowa get beat deep and exploited in the secondary opposite Jamari Harris. So I just think at some point you're either going to have to get pressure with 4, which Iowa hasn't really done consistently all season, or you're going to have to blitz, which takes, opens up areas on the field. Yeah. So that's why I'm kind of a little nervous. I do think they have the capability to dink and dunk their way down the field, like Penn State did last year,
Yeah. That's where it's going to be determined, and if they can start putting some pressure on the quarterback, if Y.A. Black can get to the QB a few times, if Max Llewellyn can spell some minutes and get back there. Aaron Graves was great in the first game, had 3 sacks against Illinois State. He's still a presence out there, certainly, but hasn't had a sack since then. Even those 3 sacks still rank pretty high in the Big Ten this season, but I'd like to see a little bit more out of him. But this Iowa defense knows what they're going up against this week, and they know that this is one of the most explosive, if not the most explosive offense in college football this season, and they've got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, I mean, needless to say, they're very balanced, and they've got good talent at all positions. So it's not like you can load up in any one area. You really just have to play great team defense, and it's probably the only way you have a chance to slow them down. They've had a lot of big plays this year, and they've got really good players. You just named 4 of them that are really talented, and they're really good up front as well. Very veteran up there. So, and that's their whole team. They've recruited well historically, and now they've done a good job with the portal as well. A couple key additions on the offensive side, running back, center to name 2, and obviously the quarterback on top of it. So right up the middle, 3 really good players. So there really is no weakness there, and it's just a matter of trying to, compete with them each and every down.
Regardless of rankings and stuff like that, we just gonna go out there and compete like our coach tells us. That's just the number one thing. You got to compete. You can't look at these stats and things like that, because that's losing half the battle before you even play. So just, they got good players, but we're going to compete.
Yeah, we watched this year, and then obviously we watched, we're at K-State. Asked him to do similar things, obviously different offense, but no, he's able to leave the pocket. Obviously, talented runner, dude can fly, bigger guy too. He's got a lot of pieces around him right now. So I mean, he doesn't really need to run the ball, but when you have two good running backs and receivers, but we know that that's available, especially short yardage or in the hot zone.
Do you think, Mike, that this is a game that will determine Iowa's postseason fate? Do you think that they could, let's just say that they lose to Ohio State, do you think that this is still a team that can make the CFP?
There's narrow margins on that. If they lose to Ohio State, I mean, it depends on what it looks like. Mm-hmm. If they get beat 56-7, whatever it was, like they did in 2022, then I kind of have a hard time.
Yeah.
Because where's the quality of wins at,
Exactly.
Washington already has 2 losses. Mm-hmm. They might have more by the end of the time we play them next week. They could lose to Michigan at home. If they win, they're going to be ranked in the top 20 probably, maybe top 15. And then that Iowa State loss looks decent. Mm-hmm. And then I think you can afford another loss. Now, if they do lose,
I think they can afford another loss if they're
10-2. If they beat Ohio State,
yes.
Beat Ohio State.
Okay.
If they lose, they have to run the table just to have a chance. Mm-hmm. You look at the SEC, and it seems like they have 4 bids just locked up with Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and who's the other one? Texas. Mm-hmm. Can the Big Ten get 3? Yes. Can they get 4? I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And I think Penn State, Michigan with their wins, they could get 10 wins. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State, that's 4 teams right there. You're kind of rooting for other teams like that to lose who you don't play.
Oregon and USC.
Yeah. So it's going to be, a lot tougher if you lose. But if you lose by like a score and it's close, I think if you run the table, you could make the college football playoff.
Yeah, that's true. You at least can say, hey, we kept it within 10 of.
I don't think it's a gimme though. Right. I think it's like, depends on what other teams have, Mm-hmm. There's a scenario where
win other games. I mean, if they start winning games by 10, 15, 20 points, that certainly helps their case.
Sure. There's a national narrative out there already starting that 3-loss Georgia or 3-loss Alabama will get in over, some teams with better records. And some people might believe that's true. I know they all play, I know Georgia lost Alabama. They're playing Texas this year, I believe, or Tennessee, one of the two. But that'd be a shame, kind of, I think. But
at the same time, think about this. Does Ohio State partially think that, it's less of a, is our season riding on this game, but like with Ohio State knowing that they've got so many tough opponents coming up, they probably think, all right, one of these teams is probably going to beat us, whether it's Michigan, whether it's Oregon, Penn State. Like, there's probably a team in here that could hand Ohio State a loss, and they can handle a loss and still get in the CFP. But could they handle a loss to Oregon and Iowa and still get in the CFP? I mean, they know that the margin of error is pretty slim for them as well, considering the games that they've got coming up in October and November.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I lose to Iowa and Oregon, run the table. Who knows who goes in the Big Ten title game at that point? Oregon got your tiebreaker. Mm-hmm. If Iowa beats you, are they going to go to the the Big Ten title game? Because unless they drop so many games, that's just a wild scenario in my mind. Mm-hmm. But the brand always helps you. Mm-hmm. Ohio State having so many talented players, having one of the best receivers in the game.
Yep. It's just like Alabama last year getting into the CFP.
Yeah.
It's like, when you're
over an undefeated Florida State.
And to their credit, it's like they obviously deserve it. It's like when you're rattling off those games that they've lost over the last 5 years that are all just to ranked opponents and half of them are Michigan, like they deserve the credit that they're getting this year. They deserve being one of those teams that gets a little bit of extra boost when it comes to CFP time. But one of those guys that we talked about that's going to be this game is going to mean a lot to him is Luke Lachey. This is probably his last season as a Hawkeye. I think he could come back for one more if he wanted to, but I think this guy's got NFL aspirations and is probably going to make that jump after this year. But his dad played at Ohio State, played in the NFL for the Redskins for a number of years, now is on the radio call for the Buckeyes, and this game means a whole lot to Luke Lachey, and his family's watching. This is one that he really would like to get on Saturday.
We know what your dad's doing. What do your mom and your sisters do and stuff like that on Saturday?
On Saturday, they're going to be in the stands watching. Have a lot of people there. I've been requesting a lot of tickets, and my mom will still have to purchase some through Iowa. And so no, it'll be cool. I know there'll be a lot of people there supporting me, and it'll be special. So I'm just looking forward to take advantage of it.
How many people? How many tickets?
I've gotten. I don't know, probably like 15 tickets from teammates, and then I think they'll buy a lot, and then just a lot of people from the community will be there too. So it'll be great.
Who's your biggest fan in your family? You got a
My
great
biggest
family.
fan? Oh, that's tough. I'd say all of them. My sister Paige we call her an Iowa freak. She loves Iowa. She comes here whenever we see any of those Hawkeyes that are standing around. She'll take a picture with it. And she's 32. I will say that now. But she's a huge fan. She loves Caitlin Clark, and I'd just say she's probably the biggest Iowa fan. She's my oldest sister, so I think the dynamic there from oldest to youngest sibling is definitely there. So.
What are your conversations like with your dad this week?
We talked a little bit. Just catching up. We talk a little bit about Ohio State and. How things are going here. I think really the conversation about how things will go on Saturday will really come later in the week, as it gets closer. But we're both excited for it. He's got a job to do, and I know he'll do great. And I'm sure he's excited to be able to watch me play.
Not your first time coming to Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that feels different about this trip versus 2 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say a lot feels different. Last time I was really stressed. I felt a lot of pressure in that, and now I have the experience. I feel great going into it, and I'm just super excited for the opportunity to do it again, because I think that last year was the only time we were really scheduled for them, and they came with the new schedule, and they were on the schedule, so it was cool. I'm excited for it.
Is there a favorite Ohio State game that you've been to?
I went to in 2016. I went to Ohio State, Michigan, and it was double overtime game where they scored. Curtis Samuel scored going up the left sideline, or kind of left the middle, and Pat was actually right there to hug him up there. So my brother and I stormed the field after that. It was cool.
Did you think when you were storming the field that you'd be taking the field as a player?
Man, I don't know. I think I was a freshman in high school then, and I wasn't sure whether I loved football, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to play basketball or football, and so I just back then I guess I didn't know. But it's a cool feeling to be able to go out there in different colors and swarm out there with my brothers, and it'll be a lot of fun. We're excited for the opportunity.
Are we able to see? I was just looking at Luke Lachey's bio online. Are we able to see somewhere his offers coming out of high school? Did he have an offer from Ohio State coming out of school?
I don't. I would imagine he would have taken that, but maybe at the 2-4s. I'm not sure actually.
Yeah, that's just an interesting narrative too for a guy like both Lachey and Caleb, who I think are the only Ohio guys on the roster. Doesn't sound like Caleb, got an actual offer from them, maybe went on a visit.
He even said that if he would have got one, he wouldn't have went there, but who knows if that's,
yeah. Do we actually believe that? I don't know, maybe. He was giving Ohio State a little bit of bulletin board material. Here's Luke Lachey's 24/7.
I just have it up too.
Okay.
It says he has an offer from Michigan State, Akron, Bowling Green, and Cincinnati.
Wow, really?
So that would make sense. I mean, I got to imagine if you grow up as a big Ohio State fan and they give you a scholarship, you're probably going to go, right? It's, all the fans out there are Hawkeye fans. Just imagine Iowa giving you an offer.
Yeah.
Of course you'd take it, right?
Yeah. I feel like multiplied by 10, I feel like, just because Ohio State is not just a Big Ten contender, a national contender, and they are, even though there are a lot of Division I programs in the state, Ohio State doesn't have an in-state like Iowa State. Cincinnati's a good Big 12 program, but Ohio State truly is the brand for that entire state. So for guys that come out of Ohio getting that offer, boy, you have to think that means a lot to them. One interesting, I'm gonna sidebar for just a minute here. I just thought about this after watching the vice presidential debate last night. You got some vice presidential debate takes you want to?
I watched the first half of it, and then I turned the Ohio State-Michigan State game on.
Good choice.
My non-political take is that them being so cordial made it so boring. I wanted to see insult, and they've insulted each other on the campaign trail. I mean, I'm in news, so I was like, all right, let's get it. But they were so nice.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good thing.
It was really a flashback to old presidential debates back in the 90s.
Very cordial.
Yes, yeah. A couple guys that were very nice to each other. I didn't think you'd actually have a take. But the point I was going to bring up is this, that Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Did not go to Minnesota, but he's a Minnesota Gopher fan, I think. His colleges, I just looked this up today. He went to Chadron State in western Nebraska and then went to MSU Mankato. Big Adam Thielen guy, got to imagine. But he's been in some Gopher games.
He's from Nebraska. I wonder if he's a Husker at heart, but politically he's probably a Gopher.
Interesting question. I just saw him hugging Goldie the Gopher recently, so that's why I say that.
He went to the Michigan game last week.
Yeah, that's right. So Iowa's last game. Obviously, probably watched a little bit by Tim Waller, some attention paid to it. Now, Iowa's next game. Ohio State was the undergrad for J.D. Vance.
Wow.
Republican nominee. So, anyway, just a weird little tie-in that both vice presidential nominees have a connection to Iowa's two early Big Ten opponents, their first two opponents.
That's kind of weird. I always say in the newsroom, everything has an Iowa connection, so.
That's true.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much, again, I haven't really heard J.D. Vance talk about it. Is he a big Ohio State Buckeye guy?
I haven't heard many of those conversations, so I imagine he does. He went to undergrad. I know he went to Yale for grad, so maybe he's a Bulldog too. They're the Bulldogs, right?
Yale is the Bulldogs, yes.
So.
Yeah. Some Ivy League connections. Trump went to UPenn, I believe, an Ivy League school. And then,
I didn't know that.
Oh, I just looked that up today too. And Kamala, do you know where she went to school?
Somewhere in California?
She did her...
Howard. She went to Howard.
Very good, yes, but then did her postgraduate stuff at some school in California I never heard of. Anywho, get it back on the rails a little bit, talking about the Buckeyes. We have some sound bites from our affiliate station. They've got a podcast out there in Columbus.
So if you're looking to go behind enemy lines this week and kind of get an Ohio State perspective, it's obviously different perspective than an Iowa one. Our parent company has a station in Columbus, Ohio, AB6 on your side in Columbus, and they sent us a clip. It's about 2 minutes long, of their sports director talking about the Iowa game. So this is from Buckeye Fever Podcast.
Let's hear it.
This weekend, we get a Luke Lachey homecoming. So when I think about Iowa, it is tight end university. When I think about Ohio State, it is wide receivers. When I think about Wisconsin, it's running backs. Iowa always produces good tight ends. Luke Lachey, he is the son of Jim Lachey. We all know Jim, former All-American lineman for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and now he's on the broadcast team with Paul Keels doing the game each Saturday. So we hope Luke has a great game. I want him to have 150 yards and 0 touchdowns. Luke, we don't need you to find the end zone, but we want you to enjoy your last game here at the Shoe. His offense, though, is actually pretty decent. All right, so Iowa's 66th in total offense, which by Iowa standards is like the old Houston Oilers run and shoot. I mean, a 66th ranked Iowa offense is something. So this offense is actually passable. We'll see how the Buckeye defense handles them. I still think OSU is going to shut them down. They're not good. They're just Iowa good. But the defense on Iowa is always solid. They're 18th in the country this year. Once again, a very good defense. So that's what I'm looking forward to most. If you want to poke a hole in Ohio State, it's the fact they haven't played anyone yet. Michigan State was their biggest challenge, and if we're being honest, that's not a huge challenge. So to me, this will be the first chance to see Ohio State with their two-headed monster of Quinshon and Travion. Can they run it down the throat of a team that prides itself on not letting teams run it down their throat? So for me, that's the matchup I'm looking forward to most. The Ohio State offensive line, rebuilt this year, the rebuilt running game with Chip Kelly against that Iowa defense.
And if you want a fun story about how that man, Dave Holmes, got escorted out of the press box in Iowa City in 2017 when Iowa beat 55-20, the Ohio State Buckeyes 55-24. You can check out the podcast, the Buckeye Fever Podcast. So pretty fair assessment,
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's saying things that that Iowa fans would be saying. They're like, hey, this offense is not outstanding, but it's good enough to be an Iowa Hawkeye offense.
I do think that Ohio State will come out and not run the ball early. I think they're going to try and get the ball out in the flat, in space, to loosen up that defense, and then pound it. I think that's their game plan. Now, I could be wrong. They could just run it in there and be like, we're tougher than you. Let's see. But that's kind of what I think the Ohio State offense is going to do, because they're kind of effective. They've got a lot of playmakers. Their third receiver, would probably make plays at Iowa. His name is Tate. I forgot his first name, but he's pretty good too.
Yeah. Do you think of when you think of Ohio State, do you think of wide receivers?
Definitely over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
When you're looking at the talent that's come out of there, with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I'm probably going to blank on the ones that you have, but there's just a ton of NFL wide receivers in the league right now that are from Ohio State.
Yeah. When I think of Ohio State, I think of them, again, more historically as like a defensive team. I think of some of those,
sure.
like like I think of them as like a linebacker university that produces guys. You know, when you think about like AJ Hawk,
Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Curtis Samuel. Even going a little further back, I don't think he's playing this year, but I have Michael Thomas was an Ohio State wide receiver. Ted Ginn
nice.
was a good Ohio State receiver. So like over the past 10 years, I think that's totally accurate.
Heisman finalist, wasn't Ted Ginn? Like,
yeah.
Runner-up.
And they got smoked by Florida that year in the Natty.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So that I always think of linebackers too, just because I'm a Packer fan. AJ Hawk. Now I'm blanking on James Laurinaitis.
Laurinaitis.
Yeah, they've got some good linebackers.
Did Matthews go to Ohio State?
He went to USC.
Oh, duh, that's right. Yeah. I was thinking some other.
Oh, Chris Olave, thanks, hair trigger in the.
Oh, sure.
Just there's like a ton of them, right? Like when's the last time Iowa had I think Amir Smith-Marsette's on a roster, but he's not making, he's not in the top 3 of a team.
Yeah, I think that even or maybe it was 2 years ago that Mitch Fick posted a video on Twitter about Iowa wide receiver actually catching a touchdown in the NFL. That it was the first since 2014 or something like that.
It was Smith-Marset. Yeah, I think he caught one for the Vikings.
Yeah, and so I mean, if there's an opposite of wide receiver look no further than our friends in Iowa City.
But maybe things are turning around. Iowa got an offer a few weeks ago from a 4-star wide receiver from, I believe, St. Louis area. I can't remember exactly, but so.
And Gill, I mean, I don't know what Jacob Gill.
Gill's looked pretty good,
I mean, he's got maybe a couple years left that he's going to play at the University of Iowa, so something could be happening there. Caleb Brown, never know when he's going to have his breakout game. Maybe it's a Saturday against his former team. We're getting into game picks at this point. And again, we're missing Mitch, but we're going to get to Mitch's picks at the end of this. We missed a week of picks last week. We didn't bother doing them during the bye week. So what do we got first here? I haven't done a whole lot of research into these ones.
Michigan State.
It might shock you to know, but
Michigan State's plus 24.5, traveling to Oregon, and Friday night at 8 p.m. So Eastern Iowa T will go on late.
Nice. I love it. More time to edit. I'm all about the late starts. Oregon really has underwhelmed me. They continue to underwhelm me week after week. I'm just surprised that Oregon is not lighting it up more. And Dylan Gabriel, I know that he's in the Heisman discussion right now. He too, he's thrown 9 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, just 1 pick. His numbers are good. I don't know. I don't think they're anywhere near Heisman good right now. But once we get into the meat of the Big Ten, maybe he'll start standing out a little bit more. So this does seem like a vulnerable Oregon team to me at the moment. But I do think that Michigan State is still one of the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten, and so I still think I like Oregon to be able to beat them by 25 points or more.
Yeah, I from what I watched against Michigan State Ohio State game, I do like the building blocks that Michigan State has. Aiden Childs, their quarterback, he's only a sophomore. He might be a redshirt freshman. He played at Oregon State under John Smith last year. Came with them. They have a lot of transfers, 60 new players. The foundations are there. I don't think they're going to quite do it this year. They might, fight for a bowl game. But I think next year, look out for them when they come to Kinnick next year.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think Oregon kind of handles them. Oregon, the last 2 games, handled Oregon State, who I don't think is very good, and handled UCLA both on the road. I don't think UCLA is that very good.
UCLA's bad. Yeah, they stink.
They get a Friday night game in the Autzen Jungle on Friday night. I think it's going to be wild, and I don't think that
that's true.
Michigan State will cover.
Yeah. That win by Michigan State over Maryland still kind of
surprising.
Yeah, still
They went on the road and beat Maryland. I thought was going to be a cakewalk for Maryland.
Yeah, and Maryland still seems like they're a pretty decent Big Ten team. The Fighting Brian Ferentz's over in College Park. But yeah, Michigan State lost 2 in a row. This could get ugly when they start getting into the teeth of the Big Ten. Next, we got Purdue and Wisconsin. Purdue, another team that's going to be fighting for positioning as one of the bottom basement dwellers of the Big Ten, and against a Wisconsin team that maybe, I don't know if you can call this a down year for Wisconsin, but they've looked pretty not maybe mediocre so far. I don't know what you'd call them, but maybe just not the Wisconsin team that we're used to seeing. Quarterback.
They played a tough schedule so far. Alabama at USC. Those are the 2 games, and they competed with USC. They ended up losing 38-21. But I agree with your assessment so far. They have a tough schedule overall. So.
Yeah, and so they are 13.5-point favorites against Purdue. I think that Wisconsin can cover that. I think that the standards of that program are good enough. I think that Purdue is going to be hard-pressed to win 3 games this year. So I think that Wisconsin is going to cover by a considerable margin even.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to take Purdue with the points. I don't think they're going to win. I think it's going to be, like we mentioned, Wisconsin has their backup quarterback in. Tyler Van Dyke is out for the season. He got hurt against Alabama. It's an 11 a.m. kick in Camp Randall. Sometimes those things can be a little sleepy. Students won't show up till the third quarter. I do think it's a 10-point win. It's 2 scores, but I don't think they cover.
Yeah,
17. So I'm playing with fire right now.
Purdue's lost 2 straight games by 17 to Nebraska, to Oregon State, who you were just saying is not very good.
Yeah.
Lost by 59 to Notre Dame. I mean, Purdue's going through one. Next, we've got Rutgers at Nebraska. Nebraska's 6.5-point favorites against the Scarlet Knights, who, boy, they and Kyle Monangai are looking like a house right now. Rutgers 4-0 in the Big Ten. They've got a
4-0, just 1-0 in the Big Ten.
Excuse me, yes. 4-0 overall, 1-0 in Big Ten play, yes. But similar to Ohio, they've got maybe more marquee wins than Ohio State would. They've beat Washington, they've beat Virginia Tech. Not exactly teams that are, teams that might get into a bowl game, but wins against Akron and Howard. Akron, mutual opponent with Ohio State, of course. But they're 4-0. Kyle Monangai putting up big rushing yard numbers. I think Rutgers can hang with Nebraska. I think that the Huskers, they're moving in the right direction, but there are times over these first 4 or 5 weeks that I'm like, they still feel like Nebraska, they're a head case of a program, I think. It seems like they just, even in years like this when they're going to be all right, once they start getting some wins under their belt and they start thinking, all right, we are so back, that's when the losses start coming. So I think Rutgers can keep this one close, if not beat them.
Yeah, it's interesting just because Nebraska's record in one-score games is just horrible. Looking back at that win against Washington at home on Friday night, Washington almost outgained them 2-1 on the ground.
Wow.
And they didn't have any turnovers. Time of possession was about even, and Washington missed like 3 kicks. So, and we watched one, we were rooting for it to miss because we wanted to go on for Eastern IoT. I agree with you though. I think Rutgers is better than people think, and I think they're going to keep it close. Now, are they going to win in Lincoln? I'm not so sure, but I'll take them with the 6 points.
This is a weird year for the Big Ten. Just a lot of teams that have kind of come out of the woodwork to impress. Between Rutgers and Indiana, and Maryland's looking okay. Could be an interesting year for the Big Ten in the postseason. Next, Michigan at Washington. They're coming in. Michigan is what, 2.5-point favorites? Is that what I said?
They're underdogs. Washington is the. Yeah.
That can't be right.
No, I looked at it twice. I said the same thing.
How is that? Explain this to me, college football guy. Why is Washington a favorite?
So the Michigan doesn't have a passing game. They exclusively run the ball. They've made a quarterback change. I'm kind of confused at the line. So now I'm thinking, I'm overthinking it, right?
Yeah.
Like, should I go with Washington? Vegas obviously knows something that I don't know.
SVP always says that he's like, something's there.
Yeah.
Something is known that we don't know.
But I can't put my finger on it. I don't think there's many big injuries with Michigan. They have a pretty good defensive line, like elite defensive tackles. I have to think Michigan covers and even wins outright. I don't have a lot of faith in this Washington team, but I'm wondering if they think night game in Washington adds like 5 extra points. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with Michigan though.
You're going Michigan, okay? I'm mystified by this because Washington is, what are they, 3-2 right now? Let's see, Michigan's had, they've had a tough schedule, but boy, they've had 2 3-point wins their last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Michigan's won 27-24.
One thing I will say though about Michigan so far is if you look back at the last 2 wins, impressive wins, well, I don't know if you call the Minnesota game impressive. They were up big. Minnesota stormed back, and outside of you could call it a bad call on the offsides. You could say it's in the rule book. Who knows? What am I, whatever. The USC game, they've looked susceptible to like allowing teams with offenses to come back. So I guess I don't even think Minnesota has an offense. That one was kind of weird. I was watching them the first half, and they were just dominating Minnesota. And then I turned the channel, and I look back. Oh, Minnesota's only down 1 score. So Michigan has looked vulnerable. And like we said earlier, I don't think that 10th ranking is really accurate. They're not the 10th best team in the country.
Washington's 3 wins are against, even their wins are not really impressive. They beat Northwestern, who's a bottom-rung Big Ten team again, only beat them by 19. They beat Eastern Michigan by 21. They beat, I always forget, is it Weber or Weber State?
Weber State.
It is Weber State, okay. Weber's not a word, come on. They beat them 35-3. I'm just not blown away by it, but I'm confused now. So I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with Michigan, but maybe there is something here that we don't know about. So we'll take the Wolverines to get back on track now. And of course, the game that you can watch at 2:30 on KGAN, CBS 2. We have Iowa at Ohio State. Oh, we still got them have we moved up a little bit to 19.5-point underdogs? Yesterday I thought it was 20.5.
It was 20, but it was 19 this morning.
Okay, there we go. Moving up. Iowa, do we think that they can keep it within 19.5 of Ohio State? What do you think, Mike?
Oof, I've gone back and forth. I'm usually like a pessimistic fan, and I'm like, Ohio State's going to blow them out. After watching the game, oddly enough, even though it was a 38-7 win, I thought there was optimism that you could run the ball on this team. Or move the ball, I should say. I think you're going to have to be more effective in the passing game, and hopefully that week off really gave them some time to shore up that timing that's been missing. Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson is back.
Yep.
Who knows how many snaps he'll play this week. I think Ohio State wins by 2 scores, but 19 is a big spread.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to go Iowa with the points, but I think they still win 14 or 17 points, and Iowa puts up like 17, like it's 38-17 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, under that one, they would cover.
Okay.
34-17.
I don't know what the line is here, but do you think Caleb Johnson continues his 100-yard streak?
I probably not.
No?
No, this should be the best defense you play, especially against the rush. Iowa State has good defense, but I think they're not as good against the rush, as Ohio State. So I would say I would bet that he wouldn't.
Okay. The one thing that, there's a few things, but one thing that maybe works in Iowa's favor is that next week Ohio State has that Oregon game that probably has been circled on their calendar. Maybe a little look ahead. And that's why I think that you're right, that it might not get to the point where it's, a 28, 35-point win like it was last time when they played in Columbus. So I'm going to take Iowa too. I think that they could put a couple of touchdowns on the board offensively. Maybe something happens on defense. They get a turnover in the red zone and get set up for some points on a short field. And I think that the defense, I think too that Ohio State might just pump the brakes. If they were to get up by a couple scores in the second half, they'd be like, all right, we don't need to make a show of this. So I think Iowa could keep it close. I know that the other week Mitch Fick said that he wouldn't be shocked if Iowa wins this game. I still would be shocked. I would certainly be if Iowa wins it, but I think that they could at least make it so that in the third quarter, fans are still interested in the game. Like, oh, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. I think, maybe even a late score puts them over,
Yeah. And I know we're going to check in with Mitch, who's, again, on vacation for the next week. I think the next couple of podcasts we'll be doing without him, but you want to make sure he gets his picks in for the week. So let's hear from Mitch on what he's got to say about these 5 games we're picking.
All right, morning, Eye on the Hawks crew. Obviously, I'm not in studio this week. I will be 5 hours behind everybody else coming up on Saturday, but we still got to get through the picks because I'm so good at picking these things. I'm going to take Oregon to cover 24.5 against Michigan State. It's just a rough go for Jonathan Smith and company. You got to be home against Ohio State last week, and now you got to go to Eugene. All the best. I'm going to take Wisconsin to cover 13.5 against Purdue. I think the Badgers showed a little something out in SoCal last week. Excited to see what Fickle and company can do. As excited as you can be, also being in the same conference as them. I'm going to take Rutgers to cover on the road 6.5 against Nebraska. That's a good team that Greg Schiano's got out there in Piscataway. I'm going to take Washington to cover at home 2.5 against Michigan. Michigan might be in a rough spot. We'll see. I think interesting times in Ann Arbor for sure. I'm going to take Iowa to cover 19.5 on the road at Columbus. If Iowa puts together 4 quarters and plays their best ball, I'm just saying, it could be fun. It's going to come down to, of course, Caleb Johnson. Can he keep doing his thing? Can the passing game click a little bit? And can this defense limit the big plays that we've seen pop up and get a turnover or two? We'll see what happens, and we'll see on the other side.
Can they put the 4 quarters together? That is the question that's been evading the Hawkeyes so far, and it's going to be the key to their success and whether they can string some wins together here in the Big Ten.
Before we wrap this up,
Sure.
Hitcher has a good question I kind of want to throw at you.
Okay.
If Cooper DeJean was still in there, For the Hawkeyes, that totally doesn't matter because he's not. Do you think, like, how much does that boost Iowa's chances? Because you have two corners against those receivers.
Yeah. I think that if Cooper DeJean is still on this team, if that one change happens, that Cooper DeJean is here, I think this is a team that is a top 15, maybe top 10, maybe CFP almost lock that has a chance to run the table in their regular season. This is such a different team if that guy comes back on the team. So, yeah, I think that for sure they could lock them down if you've got those two guys going against their wide receivers.
Good question.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know why I was thinking the same question yesterday. Maybe because it's been so tough to see Cooper's start in Philadelphia. Did you see his plays over the weekend where he's returning punts right now for the Eagles, and he got ran into by his own player twice on Sunday? It's like...
I did not see that.
Love the kid. Again, I go back a ways with him. I've been covering him since he was a sophomore in high school. Love that family. I do wish that he'd made a different choice and decided to come back to Iowa for one more year, have another All-American season, have his name and number put up there on the Ring of Honor, have a chance to get this team to the CFP, come back and actually be a first-round pick in the NFL draft next year. I feel like a lot of things could have gone differently, could have gone better for both the Hawkeyes and Cooper DeJean if he's a Hawkeye for one more year.
Yeah, but I did see Riley Moss at corner had a few big plays for your Broncos.
Oh, boy. Yep.
Beating Aaron Rodgers this past week. So
love seeing
big things for some Hawkeye defenders.
Both of us love seeing that game happen.
Actually, I was rooting for the Jets, but
still tied to Aaron Rodgers?
A little bit of that. A little bit.
I have riding on it.
I didn't have money riding on it. I had some fantasy players in the Jets. And I just wanted,
Not a good fantasy game for anybody.
Thanks, Breece Hall. What have you ever done for me?
Yeah. Riley Moss holding down the Iowa connections in Denver. They had to let Josie Jewell go. He's out in Carolina right now. I haven't checked in on him, what he's doing this season. But Riley Moss turned into a pretty good NFL defender. I don't know. He's not heading towards a Hall of Fame career, I don't think. But he could notch a couple of Pro Bowls under his belt. But by the time it's all said and done, he's putting things together for a really good Denver defense. But that's going to wrap it up. We'll put a bow on this thing as we land the plane and then have a chance to watch Iowa on KGAN, CBS 2:30 on Saturday. We know the theme. Continue to follow Eye on the Hawks and Iowa's News Now on X, on YouTube, on Instagram. You can see highlights from Saturday's game out in Columbus. You can see content after the game, sound bites, and everything as they try to pull off an upset that could be remembered for a long time if the Hawkeyes can pull this one off. So for Mitch, who's on the road, for Mike Howell and myself, Owen Sebring, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.